everyone. Welcome into the roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. Today we're going to be talking about a GAO report that says that we may not be doing what we said we should be doing. Anyway, so we're going to be bringing in Lauren Beagen, our maritime professor, as well as Dr. Sal Mercogliano, associate professor of history at Campbell University. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'm going to throw this question out to both of you. First off, what did you think of the report when you saw it? And is it a big deal or not so big deal? Lauren, I'll start with you.
Sure. I was surprised to see it, but not surprised by its findings. I think it is a big deal because we need to be better at actually doing the things that we have been given authority to the agencies to do. Merit is supposed to be doing some implementing rulemaking here. They haven't yet. They have a lot on their plate. I think a lot of the maritime agencies do these days. But if we have the authority to do so, to make this better, to make sure that our cargo preference is actually being fulfilled, we have a duty to do so. And Congress sent that over to MARAD to do.
Sal, same thing. Is this a big deal? First off, what did you think of the report?
Well, I think the report hits on some key issues. I don't think they went far enough in on the Department of Defense. But, the mission of the Maritime Administration is to promote the U.S. Merchant Marine. And by doing that, it is overseeing, regulating, and ensuring that government agencies, at the very least, are doing this. The U.S. Merchant Marine today is built on three legs. One of them is the Maritime Security Program that gives money to some shipping companies to keep them in the international trade. The second leg is the Jones Act, but that third leg is cargo preference, making sure that U.S. government cargo, as per law, is being carried on board U.S. ships. And as the GAO report says, since 2013, MARAD hasn't just been not reporting on this, but they haven't issued an annual report since then. So we don't know quite exactly what the Maritime Administration has been doing for almost a decade.
With that, just going into some of that, the GAO was told by MARAD, I'm quoting from the American Shipper article that came out by John Gallagher, that the agency has not been taking enforcement actions in part because it has not developed the necessary regulations, and that it has not developed regulations, quote, primarily due to challenges in reaching consensus with other agencies on how to implement cargo preference requirements, close quote, according to the report. Is that simply kicking the can down the road, Lauren?
I mean, a little bit, sure. I mean, they're saying we can't come to an agreement. The trouble is we're all on the same team here, right? So these are all U.S. agencies. And so there's a requirement to be shipping the cargo, the military cargo, the private effects, the household goods, any private vehicles, especially for DOD purposes, by a U.S. flag vessel and with reasonable cost. If we were to start doing sanctions, I mean, then it's civil penalties against our own government agencies. So I can see where this is a sensitive thing, a difficult thing. But at some point, if you have the authority to make sure that we are moving goods, especially under DOD, with U.S. flag fleet, I mean, if we're going to promote the flag fleet, let's do it. Let's make sure that it's being done. If these are the rules, then let's follow them.
So kind of staying on that same line, this is obviously a call for more oversight. And in your opinion, what is the appropriate amount of oversight, as Lauren was kind of alluding to there?
Well, I think we go back to what the Ocean Shipping Reform Act is doing for the FMC. It's giving the FMC the power to really collect data. And really, I mean, if you look at what the FMC is talking about, is really getting that data and information out there so it's visible to everybody else. And this is what this report is calling on the GAO is calling on MARAD to do that. Listen, what is the visibility of percentages of cargo? I do this for part of my studies. And I have to tell you, digging into some reports for like Military Sea Lift Command, you have to dig in their report to try to find out exactly how much cargo is being carried on U.S. flag versus foreign flag. And it's diminishing in their report because they're not required to report this. And, it's very easy to kind of let this information get so buried in, especially with the Department of Defense, to do that. Under the law, under the 1904 law for military transportation, 100% of the cargo is supposed to be moving on U.S. flagships as available. And then same thing with the 1954 Preference Act for U.S. government cargo, about 50% being moved. But the problem is when you don't see the visibility and there's no access to it, we don't know exactly what they're doing. And if you read through the GAO report, that was their issue more than anything else, is we just had a hard time finding the data. And if the data is not out there, it's hard to keep people accountable.
Yeah, Lauren, let's kind of the same question back to you in ways in a little bit. What's wrong with the status quo? If we've been doing it this way and it's worked, and then someone came in and looked at it and said, no, it's not working, who's right here?
Well, we haven't really been doing it this way, right? Because the GAO report said in 2013 that there was a significant diminishment. I mean, it was eliminated, the reporting of the data. And just as Professor Mercogliano was saying, we need to make sure that we know where we are. We need to make sure that we kind of understand, we take inventory of what cargo is being moved on U.S. flag fleet from DOD. It's required to be 100%. If it's not, we need to address that. And as Sal said, it was as available. And so there are waivers. There are, instances where if you can't find fair and reasonable rates, for example, there are moments when you can do a waiver. We just need to know what's happening. Where's it going? Where's it not going? Without really any judgment based right off the bat, let's reserve the judgment for once we kind of take inventory of what's out there and what's going on and where this cargo is or isn't moving on U.S. flag fleet.
Yeah, Sal, let's jump back into kind of the numbers of reporting the data. What's involved in that in terms of, is this something that more personnel is needed to oversee, to oversight, in order to get whatever data is needed into MARAD?
Well, I think, again, MARAD had, under the last administration, they came out with a national maritime strategy that was very labored to get it out. Let me put it that way. It had jumped through a lot of departments, a lot of hoops, and I would argue it came out as probably an incomplete document, but a document nevertheless. And I think one of the things that MARAD has to do is take, again, the cue that the FMC is doing is, listen, shipping is in the forefront. Supply chain issues are in the forefront right now. They need to be asking, okay, this is how we need to reform things to improve our visibility on the reporting of data. I'll use the example of fuel and oil for Department of Defense. Right now, according to the last Military Seal of Command report, about 70% of the fuel and oil is moved by U.S. flag tankers, about 30% by foreign tankers, which in itself is not a big issue. But when you add to it the closing down of the Red Hill facility at Pearl Harbor and the potential issue in shortages of carrying capacity and storage capacity in the Pacific, this is where this issue becomes very important. Should the Department of Defense be restructuring and putting more U.S. flag tankers under permanent charter, for example? And you can't make that call without the data being ever present. And this is something that MARAD had done for years. You go back and look, and something that I do as a historian is I go back and look through the years and years of data that have been there. You can see those trends, but it stops. It physically stops in 2013. They haven't done an annual report since then. So it's very hard to be subjective and make calls in what we need in the future when you don't have the past information.
Lauren, how much of this it conflates? I know Sal mentioned it moments ago with the Jones Act and U.S. flag ships.
Sure. So as Sal said, it's just another, kind of stool, leg on the stool. So it's also important. And there's also waivers in the Jones Act area as well. There can be directed waivers. If DOD requests it, it's an immediate thing. If it's, there can be discretionary waivers. So, we see the waivers on that side as well. But, it's only kind of as available. And so really, I think the larger issue here is we are seeing, the GAO report said that we're seeing too many waivers and maybe we're not enforcing the requirement of having it on U.S. flag vessels. But I think more than that, we need to build up the fleet. We're down to 84 vessels. We need to build up the U.S. flag fleet so that we have the vessels, so that we don't have to rely on waivers, so that we don't have to rely on foreign workers. That's something, if we're going to have the Jones Act, we need to really support it. And how do we support it? By building up the fleet, by really promoting shipbuilding in the U.S., by promoting these U.S. built ships, by training and encouraging and creating a more robust U.S. merchant marine. We really need to beef up that side of things so that when we do create a stronger push for more U.S. flag vessels and being used in whether it's cargo preference or Jones Act, we have the available resources there.
Mm-hmm. Sal, as Lauren mentioned a while back, obviously, if you have more enforcement, that obviously can lead to, as she mentioned, sanctions. You're basically sanctioning your own ships at that particular point. What do you think should be not necessarily the punishment, but how do you regulate this from an internal perspective?
Well, I don't think you do so much as punishment, but again, you raise the visibility on it so that, when you're doing this reporting and the DoD sits there and says, okay, we have to charter 25% foreign vessels to move military units around the world. Well, when you have that visibility, when that number is out there, what MARAD should be is that outside agency that's sitting there monitoring. It's like, well, wait a minute, there are these U.S. ships available, or maybe we need to be building more, as Lauren said, U.S. ships, or reflagging U.S. ships into the fleet. When you don't have the data, it's very hard to make arguments that advocate for the building of it. And again, also, let's remember, too, the U.S. flag has certain advantages to it, too. Go back to 2009 and the delivery of food aid to East Asia. That was being interdicted by piracy, and it's the seizure of a U.S. ship carrying food aid, that's the Maersk, Alabama, with Captain Phillips, that generates U.S. intervention and helps start eliminating the piracy issue on the east side of Africa. So again, you don't have Tom Hanks at the helm of the ship. We don't know about this. And again, but that data we had for 2009, we don't have it since 2013. And so it's very hard for Congress to legislate rules without that information.
Lauren, real quick, is this a quick fix or is this a long-term thing, like you said, in terms of maybe building up the U.S. fleet?
I think it's both. I think the quick fix is getting the data back out there, right? That's what Sal was just saying. We need to know where we are. We need to take inventory of what we have available and what we're using, what we're not using. The longer fix is starting to do some of those rulemakings. It's really starting to dive in and make some systematic changes so that we do really promote this as a whole U.S. government and not just MARAD as promoting the U.S. flag fleet.
Sal, real quick, as fast as you can, quick fix or long haul?
I think the quick fix is getting the visibility out there. I think the long haul is making the changes to the institution that's been allowed to allow this to happen over the past decade.
All right, Lauren and Sal, thanks so much for joining us. And it's been a lively discussion, and we can hopefully have these short-term and long-term solutions in tow as well. Thanks for joining us. We will take a short break. We'll come back after this with more from FreightWaves Now.